managers from across the globe how to create better internal and external relationships. Yes, please, more client value, win more respect and business, and how to get paid for that value. His diverse range of clients includes State Street, Fidelity, MetLife, Johnson & Johnson, wow, Steve, Novartis, NASA, Accenture, PwC, Oakley, and the FAA. So cool. And top professional services providers across the globe. As I said, Steve has done so much for this organization. He's been the past president of this chapter in NSA New England, founder and first chair of NSA's Business Coaching Professional Experts Group. Very cool, Steve. And a Hall of Fame executive coach. Please put it together. Welcome Steve as he shows you how to get paid more for your value and win more clients who happily pay you what you're worth. Steve Lishansky. Thank you, Steve. Love it.
You know, it's not a typical introduction, is it, folks? Usually it's like, what did he do? Welcome, everybody. How many people here deliver extraordinary value to your clients? Say, yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
If you said, yes, I do, please stand up. Okay? Stay standing if you get paid what you believe you're really worth from those clients. Congratulations to Belinda. That's what we're going to talk about today. And how did I get to this topic? This is not my normal thing. It's part of a piece that we talk about. How do you become an indispensable partner? And whether you're talking about leadership and dealing with their teams, you're talking about dealing with your internal or external clients, there's something we'll talk about that drives everything more than anything else. And I'll tell you what it is. It's relationship. But what drives that is really critical, and that's important. How did I get to this? I'll tell you how I got to it. I got a $50,000 lesson one time, and I don't want you to get one of those either. So I had worked with a client of mine for a year and a half. We had transformed their organization. They were doing things that had never been done before. It was an IT group that won the award in a Fortune 500 for the most outstanding customer satisfaction in the enterprise. You ever heard of that before? I've never heard of it before or after, but these people were really good at what they did, and they invested in value. So about a year and a half into this, the COO calls me and says, we'd like to actually systematize what you've taught us. We're all doing it. We're doing it really well. We're going to build the software. All you need to do is tell us how to do it and exactly what should be in it. And just tell us what it's going to cost. Isn't that a nice deal? So I'm thinking about this. You know, this is a while ago. And I'm thinking, I don't get paid by the day, but I was thinking, this is probably about 4 days of work. This is really simple. Shouldn't take me much longer. Maybe it'll be at 5 or 6. How about $25,000? I'm thinking, you know, somehow it doesn't sound right. And I called a friend. What do you have NSA for? So you have friends and colleagues you can call. So I call a friend and he asked me the first question I ask everybody else, which is, well, what's it worth to them? And I said, it's probably worth millions to them. He said, you got to tell them it's at least $100,000. This was a long time ago because I said to him, I don't think I can say that. I don't think I can tell him it's $100,000. So I walk in the next day, the COO shakes my hand, we know each other. He says, how you doing? How you doing? Great, great. He said, so what's it going to cost? I said, $48,000. He looks at me and says, fine. And I realized I'd left over $50,000 on the table, and it had nothing to do with how long I was going to spend with him. They did make millions. And the good end of the story is the CIO later retired. He called me up and said, you know that stuff that you built, because I owned the rights to it, they were using it. He said, I'd like to send you a check so I can use it with another one of my clients. Okay, I'm recovering some of that money. But you know what? How many times do you try and figure out what's it going to take to get paid versus something far more powerful, far more consistent, far more viable, far more likely to actually get you hired and to get paid appropriately? That's what we're going to talk about today. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Let's go. All right. So here's what we're going to do today. I want to find out who's here. How many people here have been speakers or coaches or facilitators or trainers for a year or less? All right, so we got an experienced group. How about 5 years or less? One person. So we got a few 5 years or less. How about 10 years or less? How about 20 years or less? We're not talking to the rest of you because we know it's hard to raise your hand when you get to be that old. So, but the real question is, why are you here? Why are you here? So we've got an experienced group, people who know what they're doing. Why are you here? Anybody? Yeah. Matt?
Because I don't get enough.
That can go in a lot of directions, Matt.
Very, very true. I don't get enough. I'm tired of negotiating.
All right. And what do we mean by negotiating? That means trying to present yourself in a way that they're going to agree with you. That's really not negotiating very well. And in fact, again, if you've got to negotiate for your fee, you've got some problems. And one of the things that I also say is that, and we'll talk about all these different pieces, it's the yellow brick road to get you to Oz. And Oz is where you can comfortably state what you're worth because the client's already ready to pay you before you say it. That's what we're aiming for. I saw another hand here. Yeah, Eric.
What's interesting is our work keeps going up as we gain experience, knowledge, additional training, additional materials, etc. So it's a continual chase to be paid what we're worth.
Who's chasing what, though?
It's our chase.
Well, we're trying to keep up with what we think we're worth. And I'll show you something. It's much more important what the client thinks you're worth. We saw one more hand? Yes.
I'm tired of undervaluing my services when I know that what I provide can be transformational for their career and for their brand.
Yes, can we get that transformation for half as much? Right. I mean, again, and you said something that's really important. I'm tired of undervaluing myself. One more.
I want to find a way to let them know that I'm creating wealth for them.
Ah, very important, because if they don't know you're creating something, wealth, let's call it, or transformation, then you're a commodity. One of the first things I say and I do all these different things. I speak, I train, I coach, I facilitate. And the first thing I say, how many people here sell speaking, coaching, training, or facilitating? Don't raise your hand. It's embarrassing. Because if that's what you're selling, first of all, you're selling a commodity, and commodities get priced at the lowest possible price. Secondly, there's no differentiation in being a commodity. If I sell myself as a speaker or a coach, I've got tens of thousands of competitors. Why would somebody choose me? And that's a really important question because the biggest issue you're going to have to deal with is differentiation. We got a bunch of speakers and coaches and trainers in the room here. What makes you different than anybody else? By the way, I'm going to give you a hint. If you're telling them what makes you different, you got a serious problem. We'll find out about it. All right, so let's address these things. So here's the thing. Here's what I'm promising you, all right? I'm promising you we're going to utilize universal principles powerfully. You know why? Because we have about 2 hours of content today. And in that 2 hours, I can't give you everything. So I'm going to give you some understandings that will allow you to actually think differently about the whole entire process of communication, relationship building, establishing value. I'm assuming you know how to deliver your goods. But how do you get the chance to deliver your goods is really what differentiates the most successful business people. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about how do you differentiate yourself quickly. And I mean quickly. I've had so many people and professionals say, well, they need to work with me for a couple of years so they understand how good I am. Forget about it. It's not going to happen. If you don't get hired early on because they like you, you've differentiated yourself, and there's something special about you, you're not going to get the chance anymore for 2 years of experience. Your experience will prove how good you are, but you've got to demonstrate your value. When do they set your price? After they see how wonderful you are, what a great presentation, what an exceptional transformation you produce, or before they've ever watched you work? Before. Ooh, we better set our price before they've even seen us do what we can do with them. Most of us don't think about that, do we? Let me just show them, and then they'll be really excited to buy it. It's not how it works, folks. Number two, how do you engage decision makers better? We'll talk about needing to do it with decision makers, too. Number four, how do you create compelling value propositions? That's going to be one of your biggest differentiators. Number five, how do you win more sales and higher fees? When people call me and say they want to be a speaker or a coach, what's my first advice? I say doing speaking and doing coaching is the easy part of the business. The business is getting the business. Most of us would do this for nothing. I always tell my clients that after they get to know me, though, not before, I love what I do so much I would do it for nothing, but it wouldn't be fair to them. So there's other things. What do you want? I'm going to give you 30 seconds here. What are the results you'd like? You're investing the most important commodity you have today. And it's not the cost of the meeting, it's the cost of your time. So what do you want to get for this time? I'm going to take notes. I'm going to agree to some things if I can. I'll tell you what I can agree to, but if you don't ask, it's not going to happen other than what you just saw. You've got 30 seconds. What's your best ideas? If we had our audio team here, we'd be having Final Jeopardy music. Elizabeth, can you get the microphone just so we can hear this?
People seeking me out.
Yes. Okay, so let's stand up and speak so everybody can hear you. Who's got one they got a request for?
As I begin my speaking business, I want it to be so people seek me out.
Okay, let me tell you something. There's a difference between marketing and sales. Getting people to seek you out is a marketing issue. We're going to talk about what happens when you get a chance to talk to somebody. So it's not particularly where we're going to go, although the more you do what I'm going to teach you today, the more likely people will be to seek you out. But that's not a promise I can make and realistically fulfill. Rob.
How do I educate a client on the value of customized humor and stories?
What do you really want? Seriously.
I want them to get it, that this is not
Yeah.
just entertaining, this is something that actually delivers enduring value.
And the reason I ask you for that is I want something that's useful for everybody in the room. And I think everybody in their own way is asking, how do I sell what I've got? But what you really want is, how does the client get it? Right? And I want you to notice what just happened, because you'll see it a number of times. Who else? Request, yes. Loud if the microphone's not there.
I want to build a process of building value in a way that creates a situation where the price doesn't matter.
So can we shrink that down to what the essence of it is?
How do I build value?
Is that what you want to do? So let me just ask you a question. Do you want to build value, or do you want to win and not have price be an issue? You get one or the other.
I want to, right.
And I just want you to note this. It's 2 in a row. So price is not an issue. Who else? That's it? You're willing to accept all the rest? That's it. Right in front of you. Where are you, Matt? Please stand up so people can see.
I'd like to learn the strategies to charge more.
So, you know, it's so interesting how people articulate these things. Do you want to learn strategies, or do you want to charge more? If you only had one choice and you didn't get the other, which would you choose?
I want to charge more.
Really?
Yeah.
So what we started asking for is we want to learn strategies. And I want you to note this. Each time somebody starts, they're asking for a process. In reality, what they want is a result. We'll show you how you come back to that. So how do you charge more, right? I'm going to put in parentheses, and still win. Right? You can quote any price you want. You got to get paid it. Who else? One more?
Yeah. Question for you, Steve. If you're speaking at schools that they don't have a lot of money,
Right.
I think my primary objective is to maximize impact. So I'm trying to think of the only other two ways to get a bigger slice of the pie. I guess would be for sponsorships and grants, but there's also a limited resource on grants too.
So let me ask you a question. So if you had the chance to get paid more, get sponsorships, and get grants, what do you want most, Nick? What would those give you?
Sponsorships and grants?
Yeah. What would that give you?
Probably more money and power to do things that I want, so I could help out as well.
Okay. More money and impact to do the things you want. So let's just call charge more, check, and more impact, right?
Yeah.
But what happens is, and I'm going to point out something that you'll see all the time, and let me tell you something, your clients do this to you. But what people ask for is not what they want most. We've had 4 in a row. Anybody want to be a 5th? Yeah, go ahead.
Dealer.
Gwen?
Oh, I just want to make more money. No, I want to have impact, but I do want to make more money.
I think we got it here.
Okay.
All right, so she's starting to get to that. Anybody else? So it looks like we've got a common theme, because the real issue is, how do we get to the things we want most? Is that fair? I'm going to put this back here. We'll check later, see if we do this. And what we're going to do is I'm going to promise you to make a lot of progress on these things. You know, what we say is the impossible we do right away, miracles take just a little longer. So here we go. Lessons from your successes and challenges. I want you to use your own experience for everything we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you principles, not just practices and techniques, but principles about how to think, how to operate, how to be more successful. And in the process of doing that, the best thing you can do is apply it to real life. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Identify one of your most challenging clients and your most challenging relationship. And think about for a minute what's the difference. You got 60 seconds. And all you got to do, we're not going to share the actual names. Don't worry about that. But I want you to listen and look at what we're going to do today in the context of the best relationship you've ever had professionally and the most challenging one you've ever had professionally. And you're going to start to see why you had that experience with each one of them. And that's the essence of building a lot more great relationships and avoiding a lot of really challenging relationships. And here we have the extended Final Jeopardy music. But no audio person today. And as you do this, I want you to consider which was easier to figure out first, your most challenging one or your most successful one. How many people found the challenging one was easier to come up with first? Look, interesting to note. How many people found the most successful was easy to come up with first? Good. This is a positive-oriented group. I'm serious about that. A lot of times when I'm working with people, I ask the question, think of a very intense experience in your life. And again, we're talking about human dynamics here. Think of a very intense experience in your life. How many people, your first thought, not something that you've transformed, but in that moment, you would have considered it a negative experience? How many people had what you would have considered a negative experience when I asked for intense? How many people had a positive experience? This is a very different group. Here's the dynamics around the world, and it's consistent whether it's Asia, the Americas, or Europe. 75% of the people start with a negative experience because they're more present, easy to deal with, and they stay in the nervous system. So again, a lot of times what people are asking for is for you to solve their pain. I don't believe in that. I believe it's useful to understand it. But if that's what you're solving, you're not really operating at a high level. All right. So everybody's got a best. So what's the difference between your best and most successful relationship and your most challenging one? Yeah, Nick? Elizabeth, we're going to have you running around a bit here today. I'm sorry. Because this is really about practical experience today. I'm not doing a keynote. I'm going to walk you through how you can come up with something you can use as soon as you leave the room.
Best, most successful relationship.
What's the difference between them?
They treated me with more respect. The more successful relationship, they allowed me to do my thing and they just trusted me.
Got it. Good. Two key components of any good relationship, trust and respect. And it's not enough. It's essential, but not enough. Who else? What's the difference between your best and most successful? Please.
My most successful, they listen. The less successful, they don't listen.
That's a pretty good indicator, too. If they're not listening to you, it's really hard to be influential. Who else?
Mutual value.
Mutual value. Good idea. That's
I do
really
something, they need what I need what they need, and of course trust needs to be built in it.
Got it. Okay. Right in front of you, Louis.
I find that since I do marketing, it's often their commitment to it.
Their commitment, very important. Okay, so this is good. So you start to see, we don't really know for sure, because I want you to have certainty about what makes for your best relationships and what makes for your most challenging ones. So you know how to avoid the challenging one, you know how to build those super successful ones. And in reality, most of us don't know what the difference is, do we? That would be useful information. We're going to cover that. So, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to actually be practical. Not only use the reference point of your best and most successful and your most challenging, but what are you working on right now? A big win that would make a difference, because I want you to think about everything we're going to do in the context of you winning your next most important and valuable gig. Again, 20 seconds. And again, if you've missed an opportunity, we're going to tune up the impact. I want you to go back and think about something that you lost, that if you had done it differently, you might have won. But actually, going forward, I want you to walk out of here being able to say, man, oh man, I think I know how to win this one and get paid for it. That's what we're looking for. So come up with one you're working on, all right? And then I want you to answer the question. And this is all in your handout there. The handout doesn't follow the slides. It follows your preparation to win a big deal. So what's missing for you to win that? Who's got something that's missing for you to win your next big gig? Yeah.
Getting to the ultimate decision maker.
Getting to the decision maker. That's pretty critical, because if you can't get to the decision maker, your chances of winning are pretty small. And your chances of getting paid appropriately are even smaller. Okay, so we'll talk about how do you do that a little bit. So what's missing for you to win your next big opportunity? Elizabeth.
I'm not totally confident this is actually as high a priority for them as they're saying. I don't know if there's the urgency there.
We don't know if we're getting the real issues.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. In all likelihood, that's the case. Either you have certainty about what's really important to them or you don't. That's pretty binary. It's yes or no. As I like to say, there's only three answers: yes, no, and maybe. Maybe means no. Anybody else? What's missing?
I'm not sure I'm charging high enough.
I'm pretty sure you're not.
Right. I know the stories. The more elusive, the more valuable it is, or the more
Listen,
you feel you have it.
You know, there's a wonderful saying, let's attribute it to the right source. It's Alan Weiss. He said, the first sale is to yourself. And if you don't believe it, why did I lose $50,000? Because I wasn't willing to say $100,000, and he would have said yes again, too. And he told me that, because we're good enough friends. I said, would you pay more for this? Of course I would, whatever you charge. Ooh, that hurts when you leave $50,000 because you don't have enough trust in yourself. And whether it's $500 or $5,000 or $50,000, you're leaving money there if you don't believe in your value. Everybody who buys my services, I think, gets a fabulous deal. A fabulous deal. They're getting me cheap, even though they always tell me I'm the most expensive person they hire. No, I'm not the most expensive, I'm the most valuable. Well, you pay you more than anybody else. No, but it's because of its value. Don't start getting attributed to being expensive. I'm their best buy because there's more value. And I think no matter what I charge, they're getting an incredible deal. And that's what you want to walk into the deal with, because if you don't, you know you're getting underpaid. I told you my experience of it. I swore it'd never happen again. Anybody else? Yeah, Rob?
I'm not sure I'm tall enough.
Can't help you there, Rob. Megan?
Seriously, dude.
I certainly appreciate that there is expertise to what I do. Everybody's a customer, so everybody thinks they're a customer experience.
This is really fascinating. Not sure they understand there's expertise to your service. Are you clear about that? Yeah, that was pretty convincing. You know, body language, tone of voice counts. Yeah. So where's the gap between your confidence and their willingness to open that conversation? See, it's interesting. Okay, one more. I just want you, the reason I'm asking the question is all of you should be thinking, why don't I get paid well for delivering an extraordinary experience and opportunity and results to somebody when I know I can do it? Yes, ma'am.
I think I struggle with clarity, you know, really getting to the clarity of the outcomes for people and having those conversations in an impactful way, that they're understanding what they're getting. And I think back to what Megan said earlier, you know, are we asking the right questions so they understand, you know, the impact and the value?
So what's the most important point you made out of the 5 that you just asked me?
Clarity, clarity, clarity.
Now, I'd say you want clarity for a reason. Let's watch this again. If you had absolute clarity, what would that give you?
Value added.
And what would having value added produce that you don't have right now?
the ability to engage more customers.
Okay, good. I would win more business if I had clarity, right, in that path. But what we're asking for often is this first step on the path, not the result. Let's watch how that plays out, because you're already seeing how it plays out. You're going to get paid a lot more for your result. So what's going to tilt the odds? You just said it, getting paid for your result. Let's talk about this. What do you get paid for? How many people get paid for presentations? Can I see you say, yes, I do?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. How many people get paid by the hour? Say, yes, I do. All right, good, thank God. How many people get paid for days of work? Say, yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay. How many people get paid for projects? Say, yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
How many people realize you're being underpaid if you get paid for any of these four things?
Yes, I do.
Say, yes, I do. Yeah. Here's what I get paid for. The value the client gets. I don't want to get paid for anything else. I might think about that because a lot of times I give them flat rates with contingencies, but basically I'm agreeing to deliver a certain result for a certain price. And there needs to be a very compelling value proposition in order to get that agreement. But if I'm getting paid by the presentation, the hour of the day, or the project, I am getting underpaid. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
Anybody had a question about that? So why are you charging for those things? Because you haven't learned how to charge for value yet. Stay with me. Got a little more to go. So here's the key point. Value is your target, and fundamentally, what do you really want to get paid for, folks?
Value.
All right, that wasn't very enthusiastic. What do you really want to get paid for?
Value.
Thank you. All right, here's a go. Critical question to understand. Why do I like this diagram? This is a critical question to understand. If you understand this, you will have that much more leverage and impact with everybody you deal with. How many people would like to know what the question is? See, this is also one of the experiences. That was only a few hands, so I'm only going to tell those 3 people. Here's the point. Each time we've talked about people are asking for something, we need to take them to another thing. And really what the other thing is the result they're really looking for. But one of the things we start to ask here is if I just sat here and told you, here's 5 things to know, your interest, you'd write the notes, you go home, you put them away, and you probably wouldn't look at them again. But every time I challenge you to answer a really critical question, and you don't have the answer, now the answer is more valuable to you, isn't it? Let's understand the dynamics that we're going through here. I'm not just playing with you. Because if I hand you the answers, you're just going to write them down. It doesn't mean anything. But if you see there's an important question and a step in the process that you're missing that's going to be fundamental to your success, and you recognize you don't know what that is, now you're interested. We call it identifying the gap. You need to be able to produce a high-value outcome that somebody wants and help them see where they are relative to that high-value outcome. Then they can see clearly there's a chasm, and now they want to buy a bridge. But if you just say, hey, look where I can take you to, they're going to go, yeah, you and everybody else. Even if it's exactly what they need, what they want, what they should have, what would be in their best interests. So let's understand process here because it's fundamental to how people are influenced and how they begin to understand your value from the very first moments you start talking to them. Because I'm going to show you how you differentiate yourself in the very first conversation you ever have with somebody. Because you don't get many more chances after that, do you? No. Send me a proposal. I don't do proposals. Now, I will write a proposal, but I write an agreement. I don't write a proposal. Somebody says, send me a proposal, it's a way to get rid of you. Because my question is, proposal to accomplish what? And what are the conditions that we need to address? And what are the contingencies we need to put in? If I'm going to send you something, shouldn't those things be clear? Yeah, I guess so. Because if somebody says, just send me a proposal after they hear you the first time, they're trying to get rid of you. All right, so here's the question. What is the universal driving force of the most effective, and I'll call it successful relationships?
Trust.
Now So let's call them out. What?
Trust.
Trust. How many people think trust is the universal driving force of the most effective relationships? Can I see a show of hands? Have you ever had trust and the relationship didn't work? I would say that's not an answer that qualifies that. I would say trust is important, but it's not sufficient. You really can't have a good relationship without trust, but trust is not going to get you a successful relationship. Nick.
Value?
Nick, you've been in my program before, haven't you? Or I coached you, actually. So here's the 7 common answers. What do you think your answer is? Call it out. Just everybody at one time. 1, 2, 3.
Respect.
Honesty, value, respect, benefit. Okay, so here's the big 7. This is the same everywhere around the world. They do this same program in Beijing, Barcelona, and Boston. Because this is about universal dynamics of how human beings work. It's transcultural. What you want to do is influence human beings. I don't care if they're Chinese, they're European, or they're American. They're human beings, and their fundamental decision-making is consistent. The content could be different, but the process is the same. So here's the universal 7 that come up. Trust, respect, openness, communication, listening, caring, and understanding. Would those be important in a relationship? Yes or no? Yes. Have you ever had those and the relationship didn't work? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, they're not sufficient. And yet we keep aiming for those things, don't we? Here's what I would say. The most universal driving force of the most effective relationships is the value you create in that relationship. The more value, the better the relationship. Anybody want to disagree? The universal driving force is the value you create in that relationship. The more value, the better the relationship. And why is that important? How many people here have a beautiful one-page, have a great website that talks all about the value that you deliver? Okay. People are really hesitant to admit that. But here's the key piece. Value lives in the mind of the other person. And no matter how good you are, how experienced you are, how successful you are, how many books you've written, how many people you've worked with, you might have a good idea what your value is, but until the client does, it makes no difference. That's a really important understanding. So if you're telling them what your value is, it's far less likely to have an impact than if you help them understand that value, because value lives in their mind. Now I'm going to show you some of the real difficulties of dealing with human beings, because in most of my projects, I walk in, they explain the problem, and I look at them and say, this would be really easy if it wasn't for the people. But you'd have nothing if it wasn't for the people, so let's get to work. So the real key issue here is, how do we learn to deal with people on a more universal basis? My background is really as a phenomenologist. That's a fancy way of saying I'm interested in the phenomena, not the models, not the techniques, not the tools. I want to know what's universal to all human beings, because that's where the greatest leverage is. And my favorite quote among my 200 favorite quotes is Archimedes, who said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I can move the world. I'm interested in moving the world. Are you? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, those who said yes, come forward. We'll put... Seriously, are you interested in being able to move the world, folks?
Yes.
I'm assuming you're here for a good reason, and it's not just to get a few more dollars. It's also an indicator that you're probably moving the world better, getting a few more dollars. But again, the amount of value you create in the relationship is a transformative amount. And the amount of value that you can create is in their mind, not yours, which changes the entire function of how you communicate, how you sell, how you engage, how you differentiate, and how you do everything. Because if you go to your client and say, what would you like? And they tell you, the chances of them being accurate are minuscule relative to what their value is. Minuscule. And if you agree to sell them the result that they ask you for, your value is fairly minuscule. It's really important to understand that, because this is what gets us into trouble, isn't it? They told me this is what they want, I gave it to them, and they're not happy. And who's responsible? You're the professional service provider, right? Who do they hold responsible? You gave them exactly what they asked for, but they didn't make them happy. Who's responsible? We are, right. So principles, I'm going to give you a few of my favorites. I'm going to talk to you, what we're doing right now is shifting the way you think about relationships and communication and creating value, aren't we? We haven't really dealt with the techniques, but the first order of business, the first order of transformation is to change the way people think. Because if you can't change the way they think, it's unlikely for you to be able to differentiate yourself. Number two, In this day and age, many of us grew up with the quote, knowledge is power. Come on, folks, that's long gone. Started with Google. Whatever you want to know, you can have in a second. What's more important is clarity, and especially clarity about what's most important, which is massively missing from most organizations, most relationships, most clients, most engagements. Clarity is power, and especially clarity about what's most important. Number 3, the new 80-20 rule. Everybody knows the old one, Pareto's Law? I love Pareto's Law. You know how it came about? Anybody know Pareto? Yeah, Italian economist. In 1906, was studying land ownership in Italy. He found that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. But what clinched it for him was in his garden, because good Italian has to have a garden, 80% of his peas were in 20% of the pods. And he extrapolated the 80-20 rule. Now everybody knows. I have a different one. I've been working with leaders for more than 20 years. Mine is 80% of success is common sense. Less than 20% of the people are using it. So everything we should do today should sound like common sense. Here's one of the other key pieces. You always need to get clarity about what is most important and why that's the best choice before you start dealing with how you're going to deliver it. Most of us are machines for delivering our value. We know how to do that. What we don't know how to do is connect it to what's most important to the client and to help them understand why this is the most valuable, high-impact result they could possibly get. And that's what's more important. Always get clear about what's most important and why it matters before you start dealing with how you're going to do it. Because for the average intelligent person, once they've got a clear idea of what's most important and they can articulate why that's the important choice, how to do it's a fairly straightforward thing. And yet we spend most of our time in organizations at IDEO with dealing with how we're going to do something. What's our strategy? A strategic planning session, as most of us know, is neither strategic nor good planning. They spend all their time on how we're going to do something without knowing what the it we're doing really is. Giving you hints as to how you transform your conversation and your relationship from the very first moment. And last, your success is based upon the value you provide. Your success is ultimately about your value more than anything else. You can even blow almost everything you do, but if the value gets delivered, you're going to be fine. I shouldn't tell this story, but my first major client hired me. I kind of had this concept of how to do this in my mind. We had a 6-month program. We had 21 3/4-hour sessions. That I was making it up. This was a long time ago. So I think the statute of limitations is over. But I mean, literally, they got their first materials, real materials, 6 weeks after the end of a 6-month program. But here's the important part. They got the result. They got the result that we had identified in advance. Now, they hired me again the next year. I was working coaching with them for that intervening time. And they said, we'd really like the materials in advance this time. I said, I can do that now. But again, the important part was they got the value, and the value was instrumental in their success. And it wasn't a typical way to get it, but that's what's really important here. That's how you start to differentiate yourself, by the ability to clarify and deliver value, not to give them materials and cute stuff in a nice one-sheet. Sir, Rob?
Seriously, can you differentiate between value and results? Are they inextricably?
Oh, no, absolutely. They're connected, but they're different. Because again, one of the challenges, people ask for results. I want to improve our sales by 15%. I want to improve our retention by 10%. I want to improve, pick it, our employee satisfaction by 20%. Pick it. Those are results. But the question is, and if you don't understand the value of those results, it's hard to articulate why those are the best choices. So there is a clear connection. The result is what generates your value. But the question is this the most valuable and highest impact value you can possibly get? Because we could be going for results that don't matter. Most of you in the first question, what would you like to get? You gave me a result you'd like. Clarity. But it's not a valuable result. Make sense, Rob? Thank you for the question. It's a good one.
Can you say that again, the desired result? How does it connect to value?
Can I say it again? If I knew what I said, I would. But I can repeat the concept. So here's the thing. We start to talk about results are how you produce value. But the question is, until you evaluate the value of a specific result, it's hard to validate whether or not that is the one worth going for. Because they could ask for any result they want. They could make up stuff that doesn't matter. And they could say, this is the result we want. But if you give them that result and they're not satisfied, then you're not going to get hired again, and they're not going to be happy with you. So again, you've got to articulate the result first. And I'm going to show you a very simple three-step process for how to tie together objectives to results and measurements to actual value. We'll wrap up the session with that.
Can you give some examples of what is a unit of measure for value?
Whatever they choose. Improved sales, percentage of sales increase, dollars of sales increase. And then the question is, what makes that valuable and the most valuable choice to go after? One of the challenges most clients have, and most of you have, is you're trying to do too many things. It's called the tyranny of the to-do list, is what I named it. And if you're trying to do 50 things, I have a question for most of my clients. In fact, I ask every client this at some point. I call it the 50 choices dilemma. You've got 50 things to do in a day. For a lot of my clients, that's a really good day. I'm going to give you two choices, much like we did earlier today. I'm going to give you two choices. Choice number one, you handle priorities number 1, 2, and 3. You never touch the other 47. Or you do priorities 4 to 50. You never touch 1, 2, and 3. What's your choice?
1, 2, 3.
Now that's obvious. That's common sense. It's not common practice. And what I always say to everybody, when common sense becomes common practice, unbelievable results show up. But Megan, to your point here, people are asking for all kinds of priorities. They could have 50 priorities on their list. Many people do. The question is, what's the number 1, 2, and 3? And most people can't tell you. It's also an indicator as to where we're headed, folks. Most people can't tell you. It's obvious if they knew what their top 3 priorities are in business, that's what they'd be doing, isn't it? Yeah. And why aren't they doing it? Because they don't know what it is. Hint, you can show enormous impact and value before you ever ask them for 10 cents by the way you conduct your conversation with your client. You can surface value before they've even thought about who they should hire in a way that they go, I want to work with him. In fact, if you learn to do this well, I was just looking back over the last almost 20 years of sales, 30% of my clients hire me, never ask what it costs. They say, we want to work with you. Why? Because the value proposition in their head is so high they don't care. The story I told you, he was willing to pay $100,000 if I'd said $100,000. I didn't say $100,000. Trust me, I can do that now. But the point of it is, what they need to see is the value, and if they see the value, the cost is irrelevant, and that's one of the axioms. Price does not make a difference unless the value is not clear. Yes?
Steve, maybe something you'll get to, I think around the alignment of value as they perceive it, so that we don't get stuck, frankly, over-delivering or feeling that we have to do 29 things in order to quote-unquote deliver value, when in fact all they wanted was X.
Right, well that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. But first of all is to really begin to think this way. Because if you don't think this way, you're just going to do what you normally did. The greatest enemy of change is what? What's the greatest enemy of change?
Habit.
Habits, exactly right. And our habits will throw us into that.
Two today.
Row her a rose. But here's the key point. Most of us think we need to over-deliver in order to get credibility, results, the assumption of value. What we need to do is we need to help the client get clear about what's important to them. Let me show you why that works. Let's go further here. How do you determine your value? So I want you to take a look on your handout. I want to give you a minute to write. What are you worth and why? How did you determine that? How does that affect how you deal with your clients? Oh, let's throw the other one up there too. I'm going to ask you what should drive your value. You've got a minute to really think about that. And what I'm going to suggest is download quickly, avoid overthinking.
What page?
5, thank you. I promise to give you some very specific actions to take. But if you don't change the way you think before we get there, it will make virtually no difference to you. And I'm challenging your entire thinking about communication and relationship, getting paid and winning business right now, aren't I? Kind of commonsensical, but not necessarily how you've ever operated. Except with your most successful clients. see that one happen again. Everybody got useful notes for yourself? These are really important questions to ask yourself. Now we get to watch the entry point of the last point here, which is why I tell you don't sell coaching, speaking, training, facilitating, consulting, or anything else like that. Because the question you really need to answer, are you an investment or an expense? And if you're a speaker for a conference, you're an expense. If you're a coach for an executive, you're an expense until you can demonstrate the value of the investment that working with you is. And most of the time, they don't know how to ask you for that. They really don't. And part of it, I want to show you why that happens. Everybody clear about this? So how did you determine what you're worth? How many people, it's comparison to other speakers, trainers, and coaches? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, good. We have a few honest people. How many people make it up yourself based on what you can tell them at the time? I couldn't say $100,000. It was 24 years ago. I've learned to say it, and many more times than that. It's always amazing me. I had a friend who used to say, I double it till they faint, and they never faint. It's not my strategy, but I thought it was a really interesting approach. So, how else do you determine your value? How else do you determine what you're going to get paid? Anybody?
Percent of ROI?
Percent of ROI, so you know how to establish that. Percent of ROI is fairly reasonable if you can get them to articulate ROI. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it in the most coherent, simple process that somebody's not going, what do you mean, what's my ROI? I don't know. Yeah, Nick?
It's the results, or like like example, dropouts, suicides, drugs, or like drinking and driving for a student. Like someone gets.
Let's see. We can reduce suicides, deaths, intoxicated driving. I think that's pretty high impact.
Yeah, and dropouts.
And what? And dropouts. Okay, that should be pretty compelling. Is it working?
Well, no, you just got me thinking.
Okay, so you got you thinking. Now the key issue we're going to start to show you in a moment is not just what you think it is, which is, those are pretty wonderful for somebody who speaks to a youth audience, but how do you get your clients, the people who hire you, the decision makers, to actually engage you around that?
I usually articulate it in the form of, if I assume that you can get where you want to go eventually,
Right.
I will help you get there faster than ever.
Megan, I love what you said. Everybody, would you say it louder, please? Just so everybody can.
I assume that in their mind they will eventually get there. Working with me gets them there faster, better, sooner.
And what's the shortfall in that process?
Where they want to get.
No, getting them to believe it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know what you can do, don't you? You've been doing it for a long time and you're very good at it. The question is, how do we get them to believe it? And I'm going to show you exactly how you do that in just a few minutes. Yes, one more hand. Yes?
I was thinking the way I value my worth is how the way that I can change the way they think.
Right. But do they give you a chance to change the way they think? Do you have to ask them for that, or do you engage them in a way that does that?
Engage them in the way that that's.
Which is exactly what you need to do. You need to engage your clients in a way that they will think differently, but you can't force them to do anything that wouldn't be in their best interest that they would want to do. Okay, so let's move on here. I want to show you one thing here. These are some of the myths that really limit your... I gave them what they asked for. We already talked about that, didn't we? Just because you gave them what they asked for and it didn't work for what they really, really, really wanted and valued, you're responsible. Number two, I gave them the right answers. How many people are so frustrated? And again, let me tell you something. If you're a technical expert in your field, you know what the right answer is before your client knows what the question is. I've worked with some of the biggest consulting firms, and they all go, we are the best. And I go, can your client tell the difference between you and your top 5 competitors? Well, no. I said, so you're telling me you're the best and explaining your technical expertise is going to do wonders for him, isn't it? Oh, I guess not. So to claim you're the best, even if you've got evidence of being one of the global leaders in your field, your clients can't tell the difference between you and your top competitors if all you're talking about is how good you are, because their criteria is different than what you're validating. Therefore, their criteria wins over yours, even if you're right, 100% right. And this is the biggest frustration for technical experts. I gave them exactly what they needed and they didn't pay attention. And then they fell into the ditch. You did not communicate effectively. I just need to explain this a little more. Let me tell you something. The more you talk, the less likely you influence. Let's just be really clear. If you can't get it clear and concise in a way that means something to them, because this is the next one. My elevator speech needs to be better. I don't believe in elevator speeches. If you're telling them what you do or how good you are or where you were successful before, basically, they're gone. They don't care about you. They don't care about how you do what you do. And they don't care about where you did it if, number one, you can give them something of value, something that they really need, something that they want, especially something they didn't even look for before. That's what's going to make the biggest difference. Make sense? Common sense? Okay, this is everybody's thinking hard. Make sense? Common sense?
Yes.
All right. Don't let your thinking get in the way of your ability to really focus on how you're going to change this big client opportunity that you've got. But you've got to get some groundwork here. They just don't understand what I can do. You should tell them more about what you can do. Do not do that. I need to probe and ask more open-ended questions. How many people take communications training? I mean, we're all communicators, right? How many people have taken communication training in their past? How many people were taught to probe more? Can I see a show of hands? That's everybody. Let me ask you a really simple question based on human dynamics. How many people here like to be probed? I think you've just answered your own question if you're doing that to anybody else. Right? These are the fallacies, the myths. It always comes down to price. It only comes down to price if they don't understand the value that they get, and more importantly than that, that they can articulate it themselves. We just added another element to this. It only comes down to price if they don't understand the value that they will get, and big, and they can articulate that themselves. I'll show it to you a little later again, but I want to reiterate that. It's worth 10 to 100 times, not 10% more or 100% more, 10 to 100 times more if they can articulate the value that you can deliver for them than if you tell them what it is. Let me say that one more time. It's 10 to 100 times more valuable to help them articulate the value that they will get from you than for you to tell them what it is. So now we need a process for getting you to be able to do that, don't you think? All right. Let's continue on here. This is one of the key issues. I want to tell this story because it's fascinating. I was working with an environmental engineering firm, one of the biggest in the world, and I had the top 25 executives there for a pilot to see if this would help them because they're engineers, not known for their client relationship capabilities, and they handle projects that average in the hundreds of thousands to many, many millions of dollars. So screw-ups in their communication, their client relationship are costing them a lot of money. They were trying to figure out how to do it. So they brought me in to teach them a program called Building High-Value Relationships. Now you can just imagine 25 executives of a company, all of whom grew up as engineers, spending 2 days, not 2 hours, 2 days on a program called Building High-Value Relationships. And it didn't take more than about 20 minutes before they all looked like this. So you got to capture them really quickly. So here's what I did. There's 2 ways to really understand what's important. And this is important for you not just to understand the story, but to understand how to get to the point quickly. Everything happens on a bell curve in life, doesn't it? Whatever they're dealing with, the issues they're dealing with. So here's the question. Most people are spending all their time in that big mass in the middle. I spend all my time at the outsides. Because there's nothing more valuable than being able to help somebody achieve their greatest opportunity or mitigate rented lips. You never know what they're going to say. Mitigate their greatest challenge. Let me say that again. There's nothing more valuable when you're dealing with somebody than helping them achieve their greatest opportunity or mitigate their greatest challenge. Guess what? Most people don't know what their greatest opportunity nor their greatest challenge is. You start to change the game by asking good questions that help them get clear. So first order of business, I knew I needed to win them over. We're less than 30 minutes into a program for 2 days. They were validating whether or not they wanted to hire us to work with everybody who's a client relationship engagement manager. Again, when they're dealing with relationships worth hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, getting it right is worthwhile. So I said something that would answer one of these two questions. What's your greatest challenge? They're engineers, they fix it, they want to solve problems. That probably the challenge was a better side. Our clients, oh, that's easy. So they say it's their clients. Sherlock Holmes here. And what's the challenge with your clients? They don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to communicate. So sometimes it's useful to be able to understand things really quickly. So I said there's 3 sources of miscommunication. If you know what they are and you know how to handle them, you'll never have a problem with them again. You know what they are, of course. Now I could have told them 3 things, couldn't I? But the fact that we spent 10 minutes looking at the answer and them failing to get the answer kept upping the value of the answer. I want you to understand something. It's not about you coming in and giving people the answer. It's you helping them find the most valuable outcome they could possibly get. And the more that they struggle with a high-value outcome that they know they should be able to handle, the more valuable you are to them if you can help them handle it. Make sense? Common sense? So first of all, I knew I had to validate these with numbers because these are engineers. But I said, what percentage of here's the 3. Let's start one at a time. One source, it's you. And okay, that sounds very trite, but let me ask you a question. And I want you to answer the question too. What percentage of the time are you a highly effective communicator on a scale of 0 to 100%? What percentage of the time are you a highly effective communicator? How many people would say 100%? I've only had one person say 100% and they had too much coffee. 90%. Let's see a show of hands. So we got a few, small group. How about 80%? We're starting to get more. How about 70%? All right, we're starting to see more. How about 60%? How about less than 60? All right, you guys are tough. So here's the evidence from thousands and thousands of people from 40 countries around the world. It averages 60 to 80%. So let's call it an average of 70%. What's the implication of that? And that's basically where these folks ended up too. What's the implication? 70% of the time, you're a highly effective communicator.
We're not the problem.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
You're missing the obvious.
Yeah, I thought about it the other way, 30%.
30% of the time, you're the problem.
Right. Well, we perceive that we are not.
30% of the time, you are by your own numbers. That's more critical than anything I could say. Yeah, most of the time it's your clients. Well, let's talk about the second one. It's them. And I'm going to ask you to answer this question. What percentage of the time is the initial request that the client gives you or the prospect gives you exactly what's most valuable to them? Because what do we know? It's all about delivering value. And if we get to what's valuable for them, then it's going to be really, really powerful. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to come up with your number. I'm going to ask you to share it at the table. And somebody at the table quickly come up with a rounded up to 5% number. Okay? And I'll tell you what the numbers are around the world because we've done this with many thousands of people. So everybody got a number? Just do it. I mean, it should take you 30 seconds. Here's my number. 10%, 50%, 90%, 80%, 33. Just round it up to 5%. All right. All right. So we have some idea of what we're talking about. How many people? It's 50% or more. How many people? 33% or more. 33% of the time they tell you what's really important. How about 25% or less? How about 20% or less? How about 10% or less? You know what the average around the world is? And we're talking about thousands, many, many thousands of senior leaders and managers, 10 to 20%. So what does that mean, folks? And they're thinking about that too. It's like, and I had them do the numbers at their table and come up with the exact, I said round it to 5%, they're engineers. Almost nobody did. But what's the implication? So 10 to 20%, let's be generous and say 20 because I've had clients say as much as 50% of the time. Their clients are telling me exactly what's valuable. That means they've trained them well, they've got really great clients, or they're delusional. But even if it's 50%, do you know which 50% they're telling you what's most important? But here's the average around the world for top professionals and leaders and managers. It's 20%. What's the implication of that? Let's think obvious. Well, 80% of the time, they're not telling you what's most important. And if we understand that, and we understand the implications of getting to what's most important and valuable, we can change the game on the spot. Because if we don't change the game on the spot, we're just one of the other proposals.
Are they not saying it because they don't know? They don't know.
Most of the time, they're not saying it because they don't know, which is another indication of how much value you can create before you've ever charged them anything. Because for them to hire somebody to do something that's not important is a waste of time, money, and efforts that's going to actually impact them as well as you. Rob, quickly.
Does this come down to separating wants and needs?
It's far bigger than that. Value can come from wants, needs, challenges, opportunities, and come from any place. But again, those sometimes are feeders or at least seeds that tell you where they're going or help them get where they need to go. But the most important part of this is the reason they're not telling you is because most of the time they don't know. How many people see the opportunity for massive impact and value already in your first conversation when you ask them the simple question, what's the important result you're trying to achieve? First of all, very few people even ask that simple a question, and almost nobody pursues it further than that. Oh, they want a speaker for keynoting their next conference. I can do that. Let's talk terms. Then the next question from the client is what? How much does it cost? I never, ever, and I've tested it every now and then, I haven't done it in 10 years because I didn't need it anymore. Every now and then I'll tell them the number before we've gotten to the understanding, their understanding of the value. Almost always, I'm going to get paid less or I'm not going to win. But when you do it the other way, when you get them to articulate your value, they don't care what the number is because relatively speaking, it's cheap. And the reason it's cheap is because they don't even know what's most important to them. And you transform the entire relationship, the communication, the opportunity, and the value by helping them get clear about what's most important. We getting clear here, folks? Can I hear a yes, I am?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, is this going to make a difference in your business?
Yes, it will.
Okay. So that's the first thing. 20% of the time they're telling you what's most important. If you do exactly what they ask you to do, 80% of the time you miss the opportunity for value. I'm not going to take the time to do this here because I want to give you more content. But the third is you and them together. Is this making sense, common sense? Yeah. So here's what I have people do. I'm going to ask you to do this at home. You put people in groups of 5. Most of these are intact corporate teams, many of which have worked together for 5 to 30 years. Let's say they average 10 to 20 in many of the groups that I work with. And I ask them to give one single word. I'm going to give them one word, and I want them to write the first 5 things they think about when I say that word. In this group, we could say speakers, right? Or we could say speaking. So I want you to think about, I want you to write down, and you can talk to your friends on the break. What's the first 5 things that come to mind when I say the word speaking? Because we're all in the speaking business one way, shape, or another. So write down the first 5 things that come to mind when I say the word speaking. This is not an essay question. Everybody got 5? Who would like more time? All right, so here's, you can do this at the break. You can talk to the person next to you. So here's what I tell them. So these are people who work together. They're corporate colleagues. They know the business that they're in, whatever it is. It's technology, it's engineering, it's banking, whatever it is that I'm dealing with. And I ask them, we're going to compare the words that we associate to this common thing that we do all the time together. And if one match means that all 5 people have exactly the same word on their sheet, that's one match. If 4 of you have it, but one person doesn't, is that a match? No. Is that a match? No. Okay. So here's the thing. I've done this with well over 1,500 groups. Let's do 1,500 for the sake of having an easy number to work with. 1,500 groups of 5. How many times have we ever had 5 words that match from people who work together all the time?
0.
Never happened. How many times have we ever had 4 matches?
10%.
Never happened. How many times have we ever had 3 matches? Never happened. How many times have we had 2 matches? How many times?
20%.
Twice. The last time was in Memphis. I was on a program with Senator Bill Bradley. I don't know what these guys were eating, but that was the last one. That was 6 years ago. How many times have we had one single word that all 5 people hold in common?
5.
What do you think?
5.
The number is 14. How many times we had not one single match of a word among people who know exactly the same thing? They work with each other day in, day out. 1,484. So let's recap, folks. This is the way the world works. 30% of the time, you're the problem. 80 to 90% of the time, they don't tell you what's most important, which we know is the most important thing to learn. And 100%, 99+% of the time, you don't even understand what they mean. That was a 5-year engagement. You understand? Getting people to see something differently is critical, and especially something that's critical to them. Many of you have incredible insights and capabilities that would be valuable once you get in to work with the client. They don't care about your insights and your amazing graphs and charts and ability to do amazing things until they see the value that you have for them. Make sense? Common sense? So this is the key issue. This is what you're dealing with, folks. And if you try and fight this, you're going to waste your time, you're going to waste your effort, and you're not going to get paid very well, and you're not going to win enough gigs. Questions? I feel the weight of, oh, crap. You know what? It's easy. You know it now. There's ways to turn it around. Let me ask you a question. If you look at your best client, don't you have an easy engagement with them? Don't you usually get to what's important with them pretty simply? Don't you have a good understanding of each other so it's an easy, smooth, flowing conversation? Yes or no? Yes. And how about your most challenging client? You have not a clue what they really need, want, or would value. You can't even get an appointment with them half the time, and you don't have any idea what they mean when they say, I need it cheaper, faster, and better. Yes or no? Yeah. So I'm going to give you a chance to compare notes on those 5 words. We're going to take a break for 15 minutes. We'll be back at 10:30 in the room. Thank you all very much.